Hi, it's Margaret, and thank you so much for joining me here on the Gardening Me. It is a glorious day today. We're in the beginning of February here, and it's really actually quite unusual for it to be this warm at this time of year. I think with the wind chill, it's about 2 degrees, which I know for some of you in more southern climates, that seems like super cold. But for here in February, it is a treat, and it's gloriously sunny too. So that's always a plus. Today, what I am doing is winter sowing. And before I kind of get into it and show you how I do it, let me just get into a little bit of history on my experience winter sowing. So when I first did winter sowing way back, I didn't really have the best of luck. I did use, well, we don't have milk jugs here, but we have water jugs. Actually, let me show you. So we have these kind of jugs, and these are distilled water jugs, and I would normally buy distilled water for certain things like steamers and that kind of thing, right? So I did have a few of these lying around, and when I first started thinking about winter sowing, I decided to collect a bunch of them. And anyhow, I did the winter sowing for 2 or 3 years, and it was pretty much not successful. I mean, I got germination on, the odd thing, and even when I did get germination, it was pretty bad. So I basically said, okay, I'm going to give this a break for a little while. So I don't think I did anything for a couple of years. And then what happened was I started seeing online an alternative method of winter sowing that didn't involve using the jugs. And I thought, I'm going to give this a go. So I use that method to sow a bunch of different perennials. And I also actually, just to be on the safe side, sowed them inside as well. And what I did to give them that cold treatment, because most perennials need a little bit of stratification, which is basically giving them a certain amount of cold so that they break dormancy. I did that inside in the refrigerator. And then, like I said, I had the same plants out here and I used winter sowing. Anyhow, it was actually awesome. That turned out really well. I was really, really happy. Now, there was some difference in size, of course, between those that I sowed inside and those that I sowed outside. However, when it comes to perennials, they really grow quite slowly, especially compared to annuals. And so the difference in size wasn't that big. And I put a lot of them in what I call a holding bed or a nursery bed and let them kind of bulk up over the summer because some were pretty small. And by the end of the summer, I was able to put a good chunk of them into the border. And normally perennials do take at least a couple of years, sometimes even longer, like 3 years, in order to really attain their full mature size. So that difference in a month or a month and a half between when they started germinating outside and when I had them start growing inside in like that warmer environment sooner really didn't amount to much of a difference when all was said and done. So let me show you, because I haven't mentioned it yet, what this alternative method is. And here we are. It is basically sowing the seed exactly the same way I would sow it if I was sowing it indoors. I use little cell packs just like these, but what I do is put them in one of these bins. It's a clear bin. Now, full disclosure, when I actually bought this bin, I don't know what I was thinking, but I bought a bin with an opaque lid, which I don't think in hindsight I would have done. I would have bought it with a clear lid. However, having said that, let me tell you that this was still a huge success. I was actually surprised. I was a little bit worried initially when I realized, what did I do? And I don't know, for some reason I couldn't return them or I couldn't find any that were a good size with the clear bins that were a reasonable price, because quite frankly, I didn't want to pay like $40 for a bin. I think these were in the neighborhood of like, I don't know, maybe $15 or so. And anyhow, so I decided to just keep going with them and put the bin on top, and not the bin, the lid on top. And as it turns out, the sun, like you can actually even see it here, the sun still gets in all sides. It was perfectly fine, probably as well because it's winter, and here where we are in the northern latitudes, the sun is much lower in the sky. So I had really no issues with shading in there. So it worked out fine. Anyhow, so really the only preparation that I did was I put a ton of holes. I don't know if you can see those, but easily maybe 50 holes in there, I think, on the lid. And then I also put a ton of holes, let me turn it this way, on the bottom. And what you have to be careful with these bottoms is, I'm not sure how easy it is to see, but the bottom kind of has a raised part here in the middle, and then all the way around it kind of has a depressed part, like it's a little bit lower. And so you just want to make sure that you get holes in both the area that's raised and in these lower areas as well, because you don't want water pooling in any of these areas that are a little bit lower. And you know what? The other thing, after I got this home, I don't know, I really was not paying attention, obviously. This is one of those clip-on bins. One of the bins only had one handle. Anyway, it's okay. It works out fine because I just use a clip on the other side and we're good to go. Okay, so I've gathered all of my supplies and there's really not a lot to it. So I have a bin here to mix the soil up in, and I have a spoon just because I am going to be handling seeds. I do have a paper towel to wipe my hands so I don't have to kind of keep going back and forth, but the spoon just makes it easy so I really don't have to smush stuff in there. I have a variety of different cell packs from like these kind of guys. I have kind of like a bigger one here, as well as all the way down to these ones here. I also have some vermiculite here, which I sprinkle on top of the soil when I'm surface sowing seeds. So that's when you put the seeds on the surface, and then the vermiculite goes on top. It allows the light to get to the seeds, but it also allows it to stay moist, and the seeds and the soil around it don't dry out as quickly. So I have some of that. I do have a spray bottle of water, which I will be spraying the seeds and the vermiculite with. Obviously all my seeds. I have 2 bins here because I think I will need 2 bins. I do have water. This isn't distilled water. This is just like regular tap water, because as well, we don't have water in our basement. We don't have like running water in our basement. So I do use these jugs as my water source when I'm doing most of my sowing in the basement. And the last thing but not least is this, and this is ProMix HP, which is the soil that I like to use. Some people use potting soil. I think I tried to use potting soil originally. It didn't really work out that well. Not sure whether it was the potting soil or whether it was just what I was doing. But when I used this, it seemed to work out pretty well. So that's what I am going with. Oh, and lastly, I have a tray. And this is because once I sow the seeds, I like to give them a good drink, bottom watering them, before I put them in the bin. And that, I think, about covers it. Now, I have 2 different packs of seeds, or not packs, but 2 different groups of seeds. And these here are seeds that I have sown successfully before, and super looking forward to doing that. There's a whole bunch of them there. And this group here are seeds that I either sowed before, like I winter sowed before, and I didn't have that much luck. I did have a little bit of luck with 1 or 2 germinating, which could also be things like old seed, right? Because I have a ton of seeds, so some of my seed isn't that fresh. And the other ones in here are new to me varieties that I'm trying to winter sow for the first time. So basically the way it's going to go is I'm just going to very quickly run through the varieties that I'm growing. I'm not even going to give too much of a description. I'll just let you know what they are. Otherwise we'd be here all day. And then I will sow each one and show you how I'm sowing each particular type, because there are a few differences sometimes with how I'm sowing. Also the containers I'm using. Sometimes I'm deciding to use like the larger containers, sometimes the smaller containers. You know, that kind of thing. Before I get started with the seeds, I'm going to get my soil ready. And same method as usual. So I'm going to put a bunch of soil in here. Then I'm going to wet it down until it's really, really nice and damp. You don't want it so wet that you're wringing out water, but you want it wet enough that when you grab a handful, it more or less sticks together. You can see this is my soil scooper. When the soil is dry like this is, you'll be surprised how much water it takes to get it adequately moist. So just make sure you give it a good stir in between putting a bunch of water in. Just to make sure you don't overdo it. But if you do overdo it, no big deal, because then you can just add a bunch of the dry stuff and mix that end until you get the perfect amount of moisture. Okay, and now I have my bottom watering tray here. I'm just going to put the rest of this water in that tray. You don't want it full of water. You just want like about this much water at the bottom so that the bottom of the cell pack can kind of soak up the water. It'll basically soak it up until it's basically saturated. It can't soak up anymore. And then you can put the cell pack in the bin. This way you're not watering from the top and you're not dislodging all of those seeds that you just sowed. Okay, so we are all done with the prep. I will be putting timestamps in the video so that if you want to fast forward to a particular type of seed that you're sowing, then you can easily do that. Okay, so let's get started. So the first ones I'm going to do are the Echinacea. As a little bit of prep, what I did is I did the tags for all of them already. And what I do here is something that makes things super easy for me when it comes time to subsequently plant them in the ground. I will, of course, have the name of the variety, but then on the back I also indicate how tall these get, as well as how far apart I should sow them when I plant them out. And when you're dealing with a lot of different varieties, this just makes things so much easier instead of having to look every single thing up when you're eventually planting it in the ground. Okay, so quickly I will show the varieties that I'm growing. So we have Paradiso Dwarf Blend, Mellow Yellows, and I have a couple of packs of that. Green Twister, I also have a couple of packs of that. Rose Compact Prairie Splendor, Ruby Star, Echinacea pallida, which is one that has these super, super thin petals. It's beautiful. Whoops. Prima Donna Deep Rose. And then this last one is a very old packet from Baker Creek from 2018. So I put a little note there to remind myself to use up all the seed on this. So for the Echinacea, I'm going to use these guys here. And these are 3 cell packs. And I think they're about 3 inches this way and 4 inches across that way. So what I'm doing is I will be doing 1 cell per variety. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because when the seeds come up, you will not just be getting 1 plant, hopefully, per cell. You'll be getting multiple seedlings germinating. So for every one of these cells, I may get 3 or 4 seedlings per cell. So that's really all I need for each of the different varieties of this, especially as I'm growing so many different ones. I don't need, 20 of any one particular variety. First, I'm just going to put some soil in here. Echinacea is surface sown, so what that means is the seeds essentially rest right on top of the soil. And as I mentioned earlier, we do add a small layer of vermiculite, which still lets the light through, which is one of the reasons why these seeds are surface sown, is because they need light to germinate. But in addition to that, they also keep the seeds moist, which is one of the issues when you have seeds that are sitting right on top of the soil, is they tend to dry out a lot more quickly. You'll notice I gently firm down. I mean, I'm not pressing really hard, but I'm just gently firming down the soil a little bit so that there's no air pockets. But in addition to that, when seeds are surface sown, you want to make sure the soil on top is relatively flat. It's not all bumpy and fluffy, because what may end up happening is if it is fluffy, then the seeds, when you're putting them in, especially those really tiny seeds, may end up in the grooves in the soil. And then when you spray the water on them, they'll end up getting covered up with soil, and then they won't germinate because light won't be able to get to them. Now I am going to put 8 seeds per cell. And I am going to start off with this one here. This one is the Rose Compact Prairie Splendor. If I have 8 seeds per cell. Of course, if I only have a few seeds, then those are what I will sow. So let's see what we have. Okay, so here we have the seeds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We only have 7 seeds for this. So I'm just going to sow all of the seeds. One of the things you do have to be a little bit careful of when you winter sow is you don't oversow. That's kind of a tendency, is to sow way too thickly, especially for teeny tiny seeds. So, there we go. So, super easy. I'm just going to kind of put them in and spread them out so they're not right on top of each other. Like that. And I'm going to put the label on. And what I'm going to do as well now is give them a little bit of a spray just to moisten the seeds, but also to make sure that they have good soil to seed contact. Now, before I put the vermiculite on, I'm going to sow the other 2 cells in the same way. Now I'm going to put a very thin, barely there layer of vermiculite on the seeds. And now I'm going to spray again. So now I'm just going to put these guys in their little soak here, and they'll just stay there until this is all basically full, and then I will transfer them from here to the bin. So it's probably going to be about 10 minutes or so that they're going to be sitting in there. So now I'm just going to carry on with the other seeds that I have for Echinacea. Last but not least, for the Echinacea is this Tennessee purple, which is Echinacea tennesseeanensis. And as I said, this is from 2018. I have a ton of seeds left in here. I don't know how many, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I'd say close to 25, even 30 seeds. So I'm just going to actually sprinkle all of these on here just to use them up, because I think that, how long is that? 6 years? That's plenty of time. Oh, I think one of them fell in here. Whoops. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of spread them out a little bit. We'll see what happens, what kind of germination we get on these. Next, we're doing some Rudbeckia. I actually will probably be picking up a couple more of these, but for now, I have this guy, Chimney. This one is Goldilocks, and then we have Indian Summer. So for the Rudbeckia, I am using the 3 cell pack here, and it's the exact same method of sowing as the Echinacea. So they are surface sown. For these, I got really good germination last year, so I'm actually only going to be using 6 seeds per cell. And I'm hoping I get maybe 4 or even 5 seedlings per cell. So the first one I'm doing here is the Indian Summer. So let's take a look to see what these seeds look like. Oh, they're in a little packet. Okay, quite a bit different than the Echinacea. Here we have Nepeta or catmint, and I have pink panther, dark blue panther, and Grandview. So for the Nepeta, I am going to use these kind of big cells. These are 3 by 3 inch cells, and they're a couple of inches deep, I guess. And I am going to be sowing 12 seeds in each of these containers. From my experience last year with Nepeta, I found that they didn't have any issues being a little bit crowded until you transplanted them outside. And like I said before, with winter sowing, they don't really grow a huge amount. The plants are still relatively small when you're transplanting them into a holding bed or into your garden. So I think this should be fine. Again, I'm making sure to really have a nice, smooth, even surface on which to sow these seeds. Nepeta is surface sown as well, and the seeds are super tiny. So 12 seeds, and again, I'm going to try to spread them out so they're not, on top of each other, and they have a little bit of space in between each of the seeds. Give the seeds a little spray. Next, we have some milkweed, and we have this one. It is called Hello Yellow, and this one is a butterfly weed, it's also called. Here is some swamp milkweed. This one is Irresistible Blend, and here as well we have Soulmate. So for milkweed, I am doing one of these 3-packs again, but the difference here for milkweed is that this is going to be sown 1/4 of an inch deep. So this particular seed is not surface sown. So for seeds that are sown a 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch deep or so, and I'm putting quite a few seeds down, what I'll often do, instead of filling the cell pack and making a hole to put the seed in, which is what I'll do if I'm doing only 1 or 2 seeds per cell, what I do in this case, when I'm sowing more than just a couple of seeds in each cell, I will only fill the cell pack to just under the depth that I need. And in this case, the seeds are going to be about a 1/4 inch deep. And what I'm going to do is lay the seed on top here and then cover it up with that 1/4 inch layer of soil. So for these milkweed seeds, I am going to be putting 6 seeds in each cell. And this is what the milkweed seeds look like. I'm starting off with Hello Yellow. Again, kind of spacing them out. There. And then lay about a 1/4 inch of soil on top. So even though I'm doing primarily perennials, I do have a few annuals in the mix. And I was so impressed with the Alyssum that I grew last year. I can't even tell you. So the Alyssum I am growing is New Carpet of Snow. This is also a super old, oh my God, 2015, 9 years old. But guess what? I actually did get good germination from this last year. Not great, but I sowed a ton of seeds as well. I mean, this was back in the day when you got a ton of seeds in the packet. So look at this, 750 to 1,250 seeds you get in this one packet for $2. Yeah, so I still had a ton of seeds left, which I guess is why it's so old. And I really sowed thickly in those winter sowing containers, and it worked out well. I got pretty good germination. I'm probably going to use up what's left in here this year. Next, I had another guy here, Rosie O'Day. This one actually did not have as good germination for some reason, and this is a pretty new one. The date is probably hidden in here somewhere, but I think I got this last year even. So then I have Tiny Tim. This one did have some good germination. Summer Romance, and this here I even have here, so twice the number of seed, and use this up because this is another old one. This is from 2019, nowhere near as old as the other one, but again, not the best germination from this one. I do have a new packet here, so I am going to be sowing some from that as well. Okay, I am pretty much frozen, so working with the damp soil is really making me cold, and my hands have pretty much had it. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this show indoors. The lighting isn't as good, but I'll set up a couple of lights and I'm sure it'll be fine. And yeah, so I'll do all the rest of the sewing inside, and then we'll wrap up out here and I'll show you what they look like in the bins. I'm going to put what I already sewed. So let me just bring this over here. This is what I have sewed right now. So this is going to go into the bin, and I'll bring all my setup inside, finish sewing, add it to the bins. Anyhow, so here we go. We're inside. I have warmed up a little bit, especially my hands, they were frozen. So let's continue on. There are 4 more varieties where I have had really good success. So let's finish up those. And the next one that I'm doing here is the Alyssum. And I have a few packets, 5 packets? Well, actually, technically 4 because one is a double. So I have some old seed and I have some of the new seed here. And these are surface sown, just like the Echinacea, Rudbeckia, etc. For these, I'm going to use these guys here, and these are 3 by 2 inch cells, and I am going to do 1 variety in each cell. These are varieties or packets of seed. It's not necessarily the variety, but it might just be the seed itself that are fairly old, or I haven't had really good germination in the past. So I'm going to put the entire packet, whatever's left, in these kind of larger cells and see what happens. Then I'm going to use one of these 6-cell packs for the ones where I have had good germination. So the Tiny Tim, I'm going to use that, and the new packet of Summer Romance. I'll be doing a 6-cell pack of each, and I will be sowing about 10 seeds in each of the cells. So first we will do these guys here. So the first one here is the old packet of Summer Romance. I even had here 2 times the seed because I don't think I had the best germination on it even the year before last for some reason, but there is quite a bit of seed. So let me show you here what Alyssum seed looks like. And these are absolutely tiny. So I am just going to sprinkle the whole lot into this one 2-inch by 3-inch cell and see what happens. I mean, that is a lot of seed, but like I said, I've had not the best germination on that. Now I'll give it a little bit of a spray. Now, new carpet of snow. You know what? Even though this is so old, the germination wasn't horrible last year. I'm not sure how much I sowed, but look at how much seed is left. That's ridiculous. I mean, if I sowed this in here, I have a feeling I would have so much coming up all at once. So I'm not going to sow everything, even though that's what my original plan was. I think I'm going to take maybe half of what was in here, like about that, and sow that. It's still so much seed. The thing is, It is how old? 9 years old. So the viability on this, who knows? But I guess we'll find out. And last on this side is Rosie O'Day. Once again, this was really poor germination on that. So I'm not going to sow everything that's in here, but I'm going to sow a lot more seeds than I would normally sow. I'm thinking I will sow maybe 40 seeds in this little pack and see how that goes. So I'm just going to try to sprinkle it more or less evenly over the top here. Last year when I sowed this, I didn't really make a note of how many seeds I sowed. So I'm not sure if maybe I just sowed a few, like 5, 6, 7 seeds and only a couple came up. This was a new packet last year, so really the germination shouldn't have been that bad. And now I am going to sow the ones that should be. I know Tiny Tim was really good germination, and this one, it's an Alyssum. I mean, Alyssum have small flowers, but this one has even smaller little tiny blooms, smaller than the typical Alyssum, which is why it's called Tiny Tim. And this one is absolutely brand new as well. So this hopefully should be a good germination on that. So we'll see. I think I'm being a little generous actually, and I'm probably putting on more like 12 seeds or so, but that's okay. And even with that, look at how much I still have left in there. I mean, that's a few years worth of Alyssum seeds right there. I have a bunch of Bachelor's buttons. I have 4 different varieties here. I have Black Boy, Classic Artistic Mix, Classic Romantic, and Artistic Magic Mix. These guys are sown 1/4 to a 1/2 inch deep. So these are not surface sown. And the seeds are, fairly decent in terms of size. So let's take a quick peek at what they look like. So almost like little squid with their little legs back there. So for this one, I'm going to do the same thing that I did for the milkweed. So I'm using the 6 cell packs for these. I'm going to use 1 6 cell pack per variety, and I am going to fill it up so that it's maybe 1/2 inch or so from the top, put the seeds down, then top it up with soil, and that's about it. Oh, and I don't know if I mentioned as well when I did the milkweed, but in this case, I am not putting vermiculite on top. I'm just leaving it as it is. For all of the newer packets of seed that I have, which are these 3, I'm going to be sowing 5 seeds per cell. And for this older one, basically anything older than around 3 years old or so, I double that. So this one is 2018. So that's 6 years old. So this one I'm going to be sowing 10 seeds per cell. Okay, so I put all the seeds on, and now I am just going to top them up with that bit of soil so that the seed depth ends up being about 1/4 inch all the way up to a 1/2 inch is fine. Now for the Bachelor's buttons, as well as the one I'm doing next, which is the Calendula, these actually are not put in the bins. It's even easier than the bins. I'll show you what I do with them when I get them outside. I have some calendula, and I only have a couple of these. This one is super old as well, 2018 it looks like. And this one is called Touch of Red. And then I have this one here, which is Pink Surprise. I mean, that is so gorgeous. So for the calendula, I'll be using these 6 cell packs as well, 1 variety in each cell. I only have 2 varieties here, and I'll be doing 3 seeds per cell. And just like in the case of the Bachelor's buttons, these are also sown about 1/4 of an inch deep. So I'm going to do more or less the same thing as I did with the Bachelor's buttons. So let's take a look to see what these guys look like. These are funny looking seeds. So they kind of look like little worms. So as I said, 3 per cell. And the number that I use in each cell really depends a lot on past experience. If I find that I usually get really good germination on something, then I'll tend to sow less of it, and vice versa. If I get generally very bad germination on something, I'll tend to sow more. Sometimes it also depends on how much seed I have. So as I said, these are not going to go in the bins. And when I go outside and show you what everything looks like at the end, I will show you where I am putting these. Okay, so I think I am going to have to break this up into 2 videos because I'm already on my 3rd battery and I still have quite a few things left to sow here. Multiple colors that I'm not sure. Oh, geez. Okay. I think I'm gonna need something to weigh these things down because the wind's picking up. So firstly, I'm gonna put some soil. Oh, God. Ay.